24 days after a wellhead blew at the Santa Barbara South Field in Nembe, Nigeria, it is still spewing crude oil out into the environment. This is just one of the numerous oil spills that occur yearly in the country. So just how many oil spills has the largest crude oil producer in Africa experienced? Research indicates that European oil producers experienced around 10 incidents of oil spills in the last 40 years. But when you look into the numbers of oil spills in Nigeria, you find a drastically different picture. There have been 9,343 documented oil spill incidences in the past 10 years. Nigeria holds 37 billion barrels of proven oil reserves, ranking 10th in the world and accounting for about 2.2% of the world's total oil reserves of 1.6 trillion barrels. Nigeria has proven reserves equivalent to 237.3 times its annual consumption. The country has the capacity to produce 2.5 million barrels per day, but churned out an average of 1.4 million barrels per day in September of 2021. The country has struggled for many years to make the most of its crude oil production. A large part of the issue has been blamed on service disruption at exploration sites such as Nembe, Agbami, and Bonga. The spewing wellhead in Nembe has once again focused attention on the environmental situation in Nigeria's Niger Delta region, as well as the country's oil and gas industry and the challenges that industry faces. The country continues to lose out on much needed revenue as long as it fails to meet up to its full production capacity. And it will come as no surprise to many industry watchers that according to a report from OPEC, Nigeria lost its position as Africa's top oil producer to Libya after its crude oil production fell further in October amid lingering supply disruptions. Today, we'll look at the impact of oil spills on Nigeria's production capacity. I'm Tolulokwe Adeleru Balogun. Welcome. This is Business Edge. Joining me now is Samuel Eyakunmi. He is the research analyst with Nairametrics. Samuel, welcome to Business Edge. Thank you for being with us once again.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, so we're looking at how oil spills have been affecting Nigeria's production capacity again, because this is a situation where the Nembe oil field and the spill that's happening there have come back into prominence. And there have been over 9,000 oil spills that have occurred in Nigeria in the past 10 years. And many would expect that there's some kind of urgency or a state of emergency that might have been put in place because this is such a critical sector. When you look at those spills, do we have an idea of what has caused the majority? There will be a percentage that's caused by this, another by this, but what's causing the majority of these oil spills across the country?
Okay, so majority of the spills that we've recorded over time in Nigeria has been due to, let's say, wear and tear of the pipelines over the years. A lot of people have attributed or alluded that most of these pipelines have rusted. They've been constructed a very long time ago. And so as a result of time and lack of maintenance, they're beginning to somewhat malfunction and so on. Another thing that has also affected our spillage has been the fact that we've had vandals in the Niger Delta area, the Creeks area. A lot of these youths are not happy with the multinationals in the area. So hence, they tend to go destroy these pipelines, trying to seep out crude substance.
So if you had to put a figure to it in terms of possibly estimating how much Nigeria has lost because of these oil spills, what would we be looking at in terms of lost revenue?
Oh, well, so if the Minister of Environment came up and say in the last 6 years, we've had about 4,000 spills and we've lost about 4.5 trillion barrels of crude. And then you go about, if 4.5 is in 6 years and you say, oh, yeah, for 10 years, we probably have lost an estimate, maybe 8 trillion barrels. And if you're multiplying that with an average $50 per barrel, that number is going to be crazy. I'll be scared to even pronounce that. Because if you're saying 8 trillion barrels times $50, that's like, let's say 400 trillion in about 10 years. That's massive.
So
That's something I
400
want to.
trillion, going by that breakdown, let's say we're going by that equation now, 400 trillion has literally seeped back into the soil in Nigeria because of these oil spills. So then why does it seem so difficult? You've mentioned two issues now, saboteurs possibly being part of it, as well as the age. Some of these pipes have been in the ground since the 1950s and the 1960s. Not a lot has been done to upgrade the system and upgrade the pipeline around this. Why has it been so difficult to cap the service disruptions beyond the sabotage, beyond the oil spills? Why has Nigeria not been able to get a hand on that 400 trillion that would have done amazing things for the economy?
Yeah, well, before now, we've had situations whereby the oil majors, multinationals, have not been quite, would I say, have not been quite careful with the way and manner by which they manage some of this stuffs, some of these infrastructure in these areas, and that has caused a lot of problem. We're already seeing lately that the federal government is trying to sanction a lot of these multinationals and hope that that is going to put them in shape. But the truth is, it is lack of maintenance, and that's really the main problem. And I know the federal government and security agencies have been trying as much as possible to ensure that, aside from the age of this infrastructure, sabotage decreases to its barest minimum. But of course, it's the creek. You really cannot know the areas as much as those living in those river areas or the creeks, like I said. So yeah, I would say one of the major reasons is that the oil nationals before now have not really been so careful in terms of ensuring. It's like they really do not care because most of the people living in those regions, I'm saying in quotes now, before now, do just rely on federal allocations. So they've not really done so much to build their economy in terms of doing other things like their fish farming, agriculture, and so lackadaisical attitude.
So it's interesting you bring up this responsibility. While we have these oil companies that are bringing in the investments, they're doing the hard work a lot of the times of the exploration and the exploitation and bringing this natural resource out. What's the role of the government in finding a way to minimize these oil spills that may be traced back to pipelines that are old and rusted and basically breaking down? You're allowing somebody to come into your country, be able to take out a resource, make money from it, but we see the immediate environment of the Niger Delta. What responsibility does government bear with that?
Okay, the federal government ideally should have some measures, quality measures. I think they have an arm of the NMPC that is supposed to monitor this. I think the Nigerian Pipelines and Storage Company or so. And so yeah, they're supposed to be what I would call a QA/QC. They're supposed to ensure that there's a check and balances on the part of these multinationals to ensure that they are actually doing what is right by the community, ensuring that all infrastructures are well in place. But we have a knack in this country for not doing due diligence, and that has caused a bit of a problem. And that's more or less what the problem we're facing lately, because the arm of the government that is supposed to monitor and ensure that these infrastructures are well in place, these multinationals are actually doing due diligence. They're not really doing as much job as we would expect.
So, Samuel, let me stay on the government. So this Nembe spill, the wellhead blew 22 days ago on November the 5th, 2021. 97 kilometers of the Nembe Creek trunk line that evacuates crude from the onshore oil wells within the block and other operators to the Bonny Export Terminal. So the company that operates it, Aito Eastern Exploration and Production Company, said yesterday, Sunday, that it would be capped within the next 48 hours. But that comes a day after the Minister of State for Environment said that she was going to slam stricter sanctions on all firms involved in oil spillage in the Niger Delta. Stricter means that right now there should be some strict sanctions that are available for the Nigerian government to put in place. So let's talk about sanctions, because when we talk about the oil spills and how we may be losing in production capacity, if there is negligence, if there is some kind of complicity that all companies have, there should be sanctions for them. So what sanctions do all companies in Nigeria face when it comes to issues of oil spills that may be laid at their feet?
Okay, so ideally, sanctions have always been in form of court orders and more or less sanctions in terms of financial implications to these companies. We saw earlier in the year, Shell was passed in the court that they had to pay about $110 million for spillages around some host community. So it has always been about sanction, finding them a particular amount of money. But it takes a longer process. The court process can take as far as 5 to 10 years, even 15 years. And because of that, a lot of people have lost trust in the sanctions over the years. But what the Minister of State for Environment is saying, oh yeah, there will be stricter measures, which means that the oil companies will be forced now to start acting in line with what is expected of them. So yeah, it has always been about sanction in terms of money. So paying a particular time of levy, fee, a fine, different names that might be called. But this time, my bet would be they would increase the amount of fines they will be collecting from them. So they would probably feel to sit tight if they're having to cough out a huge amount of money for spillages.
All right, Sammy, we're going to take a quick break. We'll continue this conversation when we come back. And as I told you earlier, Nigeria has lost its position, or maybe just one loss of its position as Africa's biggest crude oil producer to Libya for the month of October. We'll look into how that will play out, of course, with the continent right here. And then we will continue the conversation as we look at how oil spills affect Nigeria's production capacity. Do stay with us. You're watching Business Edge, and still with me is Samuel Oyekami. He's a research analyst with Nairametrics. Now, the next part we'll look at as we continue this conversation as to how oil spills impact Nigeria's production capacity is how important. Now, oil spills are not the only issue that Nigeria faces. This is an industry that accounts for about 10% of the country's gross domestic product. And petroleum exports revenue represents around 86% of total exports revenue. So let me get back to Samuel now. As we look at what is next. Now, particularly, Samuel, we know that Nigeria is battling the issues, as we said, Nembe oil spill right now. And they said is going to be capped in the next few hours as it may be. But what other challenges have been affecting Nigeria's production capacity? The country is said to have a 2.5 million barrel per day production capacity. We're barely skimming the surface at 1.4 million. Why is there such a deficit between what should be and what actually is when it comes to this issue?
Okay, so I think at some point in time I had said that one problem that we have when it comes to meeting production quota has been the fact that during the COVID-19, a lot of these systems were shut down because we had to drastically reduce our quota. One is the fact that OPEC had to reduce quotas for all oil producing companies. And then with the pandemic and lockdown, we do not have liberty as much to function in full capacity. So there was need to reduce. And then with the downturn on the price of crude oil last year also, a lot of these systems were shut down during this period. And then there has been an issue reviving them, even now that the crude oil price has rallied to a significant amount, at least for the year. That is one problem, but it is really a minor problem when we look at the larger picture. Why we've not been able to meet this production quota. One of them is also oil spillages anyways, because imagine if we had this crude substance and were able to produce and export them out there, you would imagine how much revenue would be getting from our oil exports, but that is not happening. Another thing that is also happening, affecting oil sector in terms of crude product is the fact that sometime Kyari came out and said that we need a particular amount, $2.7 billion investment in the oil and gas sector. We actually do need more players into our upstream or oil sector. We really need more players to come in the sector and invest so that we could ramp up production. Because right now it appears that what we have on ground is not enough to produce as much as we would. There might be some other fundamentals. Someone will probably working in a Shell or a Chevron and an NPC will be able to probably say that better. But from my own sense out here, I say it appears the number of players we have there right now are not able to produce as much as they can. And then the environment, the Nigerian economy is not really encouraging for some of these players to operate. We've had news about some oil majors divesting out of Nigeria, moving into other countries of the world. And so it tells you that the economy is not really encouraging for these investors, and they would probably likely want to they won't want to dip all their legs into Nigeria's economy right now. And that's pretty much the major issues affecting our crude production.
So, to some news that may have shocked some and possibly for industry watchers like yourself, maybe not coming as a shock, where just a few weeks ago, Nigeria told the Organization for Petroleum Exporting Countries that its oil output fell to about 1.2 million barrels per day in October from the 1.25 in September. Now, in that same month, because of the records, Nigeria now became Africa's second biggest oil producer after Libya, which had overtaken Angola as the second biggest in December of last year, saw its oil output rise to 1.24. So with all the issues you mentioned, given what is affecting Nigeria's production capacity, you weren't really surprised that this happened in this last month. Do you think it's a trend that we might see continue into the next few months until Nigeria sort of steadies its feet with its production capacity?
Oh, yes. We would expect in the coming months, definitely not this year, maybe in about the second quarter of next year, production should pick up a little bit. And that is because as much as the PIA, which was signed by the president, directs a lot towards the downstream, but I think at that point we'll be feeling the dividends of the PIA if it eventually scales through. And then a lot of confidence would be in the sector. We'll be able to see a lot of increased activity in terms of food production. But like you said, I'm not really surprised the fact that our production level has declined consistently year to date. And that is based on numerous factors that has been stated. So despite the fact that we said we are able to produce about 2.1 million barrels per day, unfortunately, that has not been the case, and it has continued to trend downwards in recent months. If there's going to be a move by the government to change this narrative, like I said, would be one, to be able to attract investment into the sector. It is very, very much needed. But as much as you are also you want to attract investment, you should also be able to instill some level of confidence in these investors. And that would mean level of security in and out of the country. Right now, COVID-19 is still very much in play. There's a new strain out there that is really affecting the crude oil market at the global level. So yeah, that could still affect us in the short to medium term, but hopefully very soon we'll be getting a vaccine for that particular strain. But that being said, we need to be able to give some level of assurance in terms of security, and as a way for them to also repatriate their funds when they come in. Because right now, our exchange rate is not the true reflection of what is out there. So anybody would not really want to bring their money into a system where there's a tendency that the currency is going to crash, and they'll find it hard to return their profits when time comes. So there needs to be a level of assurance for investors. There needs to be security. Try as much as possible to curb the sabotage, the spillages. There should be a very tightened quality control. There must be a strict follow-up to these oil majors to ensure that they are doing what is right, as much as they're also exploring.
All right. And it's a conversation that will continue. I know many people will be watching to see when Nigeria can regain that spot. Then we'll be looking to see what the November production numbers will be, to see what the average will be towards the end of this final quarter of the year. But Samuel Oyekami, thank you so much for joining me. The conversation will continue. We look forward to having you back.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And as Samuel mentioned, there is hope that having the Petroleum Industry Act in play into the first quarter and second quarter of next year can make a massive difference for Nigeria's oil and gas industry. And as I said, Nigeria now in second position on the continent. Will the November numbers still bear that out? And is that a trend that is likely to continue into 2022? We'll keep our eyes out for that. When we come back, it's NC4 to watch. A few stories we're keeping our eyes on. And for NC4 to watch, we start in Tanzania, where the Bank of Tanzania Governor Florence Luoga has announced the country's CBDC at the 20th Conference of Financial Institutions. Now, the governor said the Central Bank is also looking to expand research into digital currencies and strengthen the capacity of its team. No specific date has been given for takeoff. ESCOM employees collude with contractors and suppliers in a big scam to increase their overtime and bonuses and make money on the side through inside information. Now, this allegation was contained in a forensic report compiled by security company Biz Tracers, which exposed infrastructure sabotage by rogue ESCOM contractors and employees. Following the outbreak of the Omicron variant of COVID-19, Rwanda has temporarily banned direct flights between Kigali and the southern African region as part of new measures to curb the spread into the country. Identified as B11529, the variant was first reported in the southern African region on November 25, where it was identified. And finally, Uganda's coffee exports earnings hit $657 million in the year to October 2021 on the backdrop of adverse weather conditions and the global COVID-19 restrictions. Data from the Uganda Coffee Development Authority shows that the country exported 6.55 million bags of coffee in the review period, compared with 5.41 million in the same period last year, which earned $513.79 million. And that's business. There is, of course, more business for you throughout the course of the day as you join us on News Central Now. But I'm back 11 a.m. West African time, Monday through Friday, as we take on the biggest business, economic, and financial stories on the continent. I'm Tolu Lakwe. Adelere Balogun. Have a pleasant day.